Hello everybody, this is Connor, BoatsDon'tSink, here with another Shadowverse Evolve video. This time going to be a little different, a little shorter hopefully. But I wanted to talk about a big announcement from Worlds now that I'm back from Japan. The thing that I'm sure is on everyone's minds and everyone's been seeing a million videos and posts about the accelerated schedule. I just want to take a look at sort of what it's going to look like, give my thoughts on it, how I expect this to affect the game, for better and for worse. If you haven't seen all of the announcements from Worlds a couple weeks ago, basically, I'll show the image that they've posted on one of these slides, but basically the gist is they are trying to shorten the gap between Japanese and English releases. Currently, we're about 14 months behind. They said their goal is to get us 6 months behind, so we're gonna have to catch up 8 months. I don't know if long-term they're trying to get us to, like, simultaneous release, or just keep it at the 6-month gap. We'll have to see from there. But, to take a quick look before we jump in, this is basically what the last year of sets has looked like. From the first anniversary set up to the second anniversary set that we'll be getting next month. And you can see it's pretty consistently, we had a short CP02 format, but then kind of a longer BP07 format to make up for it. We've been hovering around 9 weeks for every set, which, if you keep up with the game a lot, if you keep up with sort of community sentiment a lot, generally, the feeling is that this has been a little too fast. Not significantly too fast, but a little too fast. We have had issues, especially in regards to major tournaments, where sets like BP05 basically got skipped entirely and had no events, because of the pace at which sets were releasing versus, like, the pace at which we were having major tournaments. And it generally, people feel that the meta shifts significantly enough every set release that cards get pushed out of relevance too fast. I mean, you could see BP07. Also, for reference, real quick, the third column here with the number of weeks, that's how many weeks after the previous set it was. That's not how many weeks the format itself lasted. I probably should have put a label on that, my apologies, but you basically had issues, right, where a set like, say BP07 came out, Verdant Steel, and you had Machina Abyss, and now BP07 was a longer format, so it was 11 weeks of BP07, but a deck like Machina Abyss basically fell off as soon as Alter Chaotica came out. Alter Chaotica 2-cost Abyss lasted 9 weeks, not even 9 weeks, because we didn't have major tournaments for that entire time span, for like all of that time span. But 9 weeks and 2-cost Abyss is basically not seeing play anywhere. I think there was maybe like 1 or 2 at Worlds, and that's just like the first tournament into next format. So people feel that cards get pushed out of relevance too fast in general. And that's kind of exacerbated by how fast we get sets. We're getting 6 major sets a year at the current pace, which is a little faster than most other major TCGs. Most major TCGs, for those of you that don't play other games, if you look at like Pokemon, or if you look at Magic the Gathering prior to this year, and I believe Yu-Gi-Oh! As well, though Yu-Gi-Oh! Has a lot of like supplemental smaller sets and stuff. Generally, the goal is 4 major core sets a year, so you get like 1 set a quarter, with smaller stuff sort of interspersed between. So Pokemon, for example, will usually get 4 major sets in a year. Previously, this used to always be like February, May, August, November. It's sort of shifted back and forth a little bit in recent years, but same pattern generally stays, and then they might get like 2 smaller sets a year that are either like reprint sets or just small special sets. Magic the Gathering was about the same, though starting this year they've pushed towards doing 6 major releases a year. General feedback has not been super positive on that either, so, you know, that is what it is, but, this is a little fast, basically the point. It's not horrendous, it's a little fast, but when you decide that you're going to speed it up even further, that's when you get problems. So this is the image they showed on the announcements, with sort of a schedule for this year going into next year. Of course, we already knew Gods of the Arcana. The Glory Finder decks I don't care about. That's not really relevant to this issue. August, we get CP03, which is Card Fight Vanguard. And then we immediately start to see things speed up, jumping straight into Bullet of Fate in September. Seaside Memories is mostly a reprint set, so I'm not going to let that like sort of color this too bad, because 2 of the sets we're getting in this fast thing are a small set and a reprint set, so could be worse. Could be worse for sure. But then we get November. The big thing they announced is they're going to be combining sets together. So BP12 and BP13 are going to be combined, and then BP14 and 15 will be combined in January. Which does essentially mean we're getting a combined sets with like 2-month gaps between them, which means we're essentially getting 1 major set a month on average. And if you look at sort of a similar chart to what I had before, you can see how much it speeds up, where BP11 is only 6 weeks after CP03. Seaside Memories is... We don't have dates for most of these, but assuming they all fall on roughly like the 3rd or 4th week of the month, like September 26th into October 20-something, November 20-something, December, I think, like 19th, so it doesn't land on Christmas. January 20-something. You're going to see roughly this number of weeks between sets, which averages out to 5.7 weeks between releases. That's kind of fast, right? So we're almost, not quite cutting it in half, but it's like a, you know, 40% reduction in like amount of time between sets. However, if you split BP12 and BP13 and then 14 and 15, right, because those are essentially 2 whole major sets, and you look at it as though they have 0-week gaps between them, and you start to see like 4.5 weeks between sets. This is basically the issue, right? We're getting a set a month, and that is really fast. So this is what has people up in arms, kind of giving a lot of feedback about. And I agree that it's a little worrying. I want to take a look at some of the sort of like consequences we could expect from this. So if you played during BP09 format, which hasn't really had major events, it was just Worlds, but the early BSFs will be BP09 format. If you've been trying to build decks, you are very aware that some of these cards are getting expensive. Someone out there is going to be like, oh yeah, my Magic the Gathering deck is like $800 for a standard deck. Like, okay, cool. But the point is, right, Shadowverse has not been that expensive. Shadowverse has pretty much been $100 to $150, gets you most top tier meta decks. That's sort of what people are used to, what people are expecting, what people are budgeting for. And moving forward, if we have prices like this, right, Earthright and Vampires are both like roughly $300 decks. Last time I priced them out, that was before I left for Japan. Prices could have changed a bit, but roughly $300 decks to build these decks. And part of the issue with that was how big Set 9 was. So Set 9 obviously had the DX starter decks for Academic and Draconic Duelist added in, and this bloated the counts of legendaries and golds and silvers. But legendaries is where we really saw the issues with this, because now we're getting less than a playset of these cards per case. So cards like Vania Evo end up being $40+, and let me tell you, $40+, they sell like hotcakes. People are still buying them at this price. That's not just like a fake, oh, it's way too expensive price. Like the card I'm about to show you in a second, maybe, hopefully. But yeah, so these big sets, the issue now is if we're combining two major sets together, how much worse does this problem get? Because previously, if you look at like set 7, set 8, which were normal sized sets, 21 legendaries, 3 per class, 2 base, 1 evo, you got 4 copies of every unevolved legendary, and you got between 2 and 4 with an average, it was an average like 3.1 something copies of each evolved legendary. So a playset with a little bit extra on top. So now if we're doubling the set sizes and not changing anything else, which appears to be what they're doing, it might not be. That's something we obviously won't really know probably until we start opening product or until they make an official statement. But if you double that, now you're only getting 2 copies of unevolved legendaries, and you're getting like a copy and a half of evolved legendaries in an entire case. So if cards are twice as hard to get, I don't know if that exactly correlates to like double the price, but you know, you could start seeing, unfortunately, instead of, you know, $18 to $20 mono evos, we just start seeing like every card is like $40 to $50 for like the top tier stuff, which is bad. Not necessarily bad from like a secondary market point of view, but bad from a players wanting to spend money on them. When not only are your cards $40+, they are also have the sentiment of like they're going to be pushed out by the next set that releases in a month, or like a month and a half. So like why spend the money now when I'm just going to have to build a new deck in a month anyway. The other issue that we didn't see as much with BP09, thankfully, but that we have seen with some other sets is we're not just doubling the number of legendaries, right? We're doubling the number of golds and silvers and bronzes, and we've already seen silver evos and even just silver base cards like Sukuna here get quite expensive. I believe Doublame from BP07 is like a $10+ gold evo. So we're still gonna see issues like that sort of exacerbated even further from this as well. And I worry that there's just sort of a lot of things that are going to pile up and create really bad issues with these sets. Because the problem is, right, if the cards are this expensive and then people skip the set because they don't want to buy the deck and then have to update in a month anyway, or just because they don't want to spend that much money on cards, then when these cards are still relevant or become relevant again later down the line, they're still impossible to find because nobody opened the set, and nobody has the cards. And let me tell you, the Sukuna Evo here, market price, which is average of what they've sold for, says $550, listings at $16. If you want a playset, the lowest listed ones are about $18.50, and there are sales within the last week at $20. So someone bought these. Someone bought them. There's sales for the base Sukuna at $5. Like in the last week, which I think 20 for the Evo is a bit ridiculous, but like $5 for the base, like I think it's very realistic that in these combined sets, if ratios are literally just cut in half, we start seeing for playable golds and silvers, like very frequently $10+ golds and $5+ silvers, which is going to be a turnoff for people, and that's an issue. I'll give my opinion on that a bit more later. I'm just sort of trying to look at things we've seen from this now. The other consequence is going to be BCS. I kind of brought this up briefly already. The tournaments, because of the release schedule, formats are kind of short and don't have very many tournaments each. BCS didn't have as big of an issue with that because like BP07 format was kind of long, but like Idolmaster format was like 2 events in North America, I think. Maybe 3, but I think 2. I know Duluth and Houston. So like, now if you're making that even shorter, it's like, okay, so BP11 format or BP12 format or whatever is going to be like 1 regional in a region maybe. two regionals, and if they're on the opposite side of, I mean, say even if you're in the US, right? If it's like, I live in the Southeast, if those regionals are like a California regional and like Toronto, then, you know, I'm just probably not going to either of them. And for a lot of people, they don't even have to be that far, you know? If you live in Chicago, you might not be going to the Atlanta regional, even though it's probably like your third closest one. You might even not be going to like a New York regional, even though it's probably your second closest one. And that basically, I worry, is going to lead to people skipping sets, which is not good for the game. It's not good for keeping a local environment growing, which hopefully people buy to play locally anyway. But my worry here is that people are going to say, okay, well, my regional is, say, ECP01 format, the Uma Musume format. So I'm just not going to buy set 11 or Seaside Memories or the set 12-13. I'm just going to wait until Uma Musume comes out and build the Uma Musume deck and play it at my regional. And if enough people say that, then A, you've hurt sales of your product, which is bad. But B, you've also hurt card availability down the line, because people aren't opening product. Things like that. It kind of just snowballs. And alternatively, I worry that this hurts attendance at BCS, especially when, obviously, we have multiple games on each day. If people don't want to have to keep up with the pace of Shadowverse, then what's stopping them from playing Cardfight Vanguard instead? And that just sort of hurts your Shadowverse tournament attendance. So, I think it's going to be some growing pains for sure, trying to figure this out with BCS. Lots of potential issues that could arise there. Now, this could be perfectly fine. People could just buy in and the game keeps growing and people deal with the higher prices. That would be fantastic. But, you know, I'm a little too pessimistic for that outcome. Now, what are some of the benefits? Because obviously everyone's sort of doom posting about this whole thing. I've given a lot of negatives so far. But there are some benefits. Now, the goal, from what we can tell, from what they've said, is get to a 6-month gap. Maybe that means eventually get to simultaneous release. I don't know. That's a lot of sort of like resources. And it's not super easy to do. But then comes the question, like, people talk about that all the time, like, oh, simultaneous release is good. Why is simultaneous release good? How much do you actually gain, and is it worth the trouble that we're going to go through to get there? And I think the biggest benefit is an issue that a lot of Japanese card games have that have to be like localized into the West. Is when you're a year behind, your players are constantly stuck in a state of what we joke about is like waiting for support. So this was an issue with Cardfight Vanguard when I played it back in like Limit Break, Legion, early G era. Where a lot of players would basically be sitting around waiting for like their clan to get support, because not every clan got support in every set. So imagine if like in Shadowverse, Forest wasn't in every set, and you had to wait like 2 or 3 sets for Forest. And you'd have people like, oh, I'm just sitting out this format because I'm waiting for my clan's support. And then their clan's support releases, but because we're a year behind, they've already been seeing their clan's next cards that Japan is getting, and they go, oh, well, that stuff looks really cool. Instead, I'm just going to wait for that. And it's an issue with a lot of Japanese card games, and right, like, my example here, you know, so, Vania, Set 9 was getting spoiled in JP when Set 2 was coming out in English. So, I saw a lot of people early on in the game, they're like, oh, I really like Vania. Some, you know, Grand Blue fan, whatever. I really like Vania. I really like the vampires sort of theme. I'm going to wait until that comes out and then get into the game then. So now you have people waiting from Set 2 all the way to Set 9, which is like over a year, for Vania to come out. And then Vania comes out, and we've seen over a year into the future again, and they're like, oh, well, actually, like, within that next year, I've seen this thing that looks really cool that I like instead, so I'm just going to wait for that. And you basically have people pushing off actually playing the game or actually growing in the game for just long periods of time in a row, because by the time the thing they were waiting on comes out, there's so much hype built up around something else instead. And that's just not great. And this does sort of fix that. If you shorten the gap, you make it so that people are more able to focus on what's coming out in English, and not have to worry as much about Japanese. And if it's simultaneous, obviously, then you've completely eliminated this issue. But even at like a 6-month gap, I think it helps. People can sort of play in the present. However, I do think that's kind of one of the only benefits. So I do worry if it's sort of worth all of this extra effort. Basically my thoughts on the whole issue. Like I think this is overall a bad decision where the payoff isn't worth the amount of issues we're potentially going to have. Because my biggest worry is the goal right now with the spot that the game is in. The game's not in a bad spot. I think a lot of people sort of push that a little too negatively. The game is growing. However, it has like competition with Vanguard at tournaments, and it's, I think, not really doing a good job at growing its player base outside of already enfranchised Bushiroad players. So right now the goal needs to be on growing the game. And I think showing someone this schedule and being like, yeah, we have a set coming out this month, and then next month, and then the month after, and then the month after, is really intimidating for a new player, and not something that sort of like helps grow the game. And I worry that it's going to push people away from buying product altogether, which is going to further hurt growth of the game. So that's kind of my biggest issue with this, really, is just that I think it's taking a problem that the community already had with the pace of release and keeping up with the game, and just making it worse. So yeah, how do I think they could have done this better? Like, what solutions could I offer here? If you really want to get caught up, like shorten the gap between Japanese and English, which seems to be their goal. I think the better way to do it would have just been to ease those like 9-week gaps down to 7-week gaps, 6-week gaps, and just keep releasing one set at a time. Speed it up just a little bit. Slow down Japan. That's the biggest thing. And we see a 3-month gap between set 15 and set 16, which hopefully that continues for a little while. Because I think Japan was having issues with the pace of release as well. But I think slowing down Japan and just ever so slightly speeding us up could have been a much better way to do it. It would have taken longer, but I don't think you face kind of the same growing pains doing it that way. This is going to be rough. Now, if we hit March, we get BP16, we'll be 8 months behind at that point, because they get this in July, I believe. July 11th for BP16, so we'll be 8 months behind, so we'll probably have a little bit afterwards that'll still be fast. But if we get through that and hit the 6 months and slow back down, I think the game will be in a much better position. I'm hoping Worlds Beyond will get us a lot of new players. So I'm hopeful for the future. I think we just have to really make it through this sort of hard part. Other than, like, don't make the schedule like this. If we're already locked into this, maybe my next suggestion is have box topper packs with like extra copies of legendaries and golds, that you kind of just get like a super pack, like one per box extra thrown in, that sort of helps make up for the bad pull rates. That could help at least, maybe, and sort of encourage people to buy boxes instead of singles, because they'll get more value out of it. But yeah, I don't really know what to do other than that. Biggest thing here, if you're a store, communicate with your players. If you're players that have a local store, communicate with your store. I am still kind of on the fence as to whether this like schedule means I should order. Should I order less because these sets are going to get pushed out of relevance quicker? And people might not be buying them as much, or should I order more because pull rates are potentially going to be really bad and I'm going to need more product to have enough copies of cards for all my players? So I'm sort of still torn on that, but I think the biggest thing here is just communicate with your players, communicate with your stores, and stay in the game, keep trying to grow the game. If you are in a spot in your community where you have sort of a lot of sway and a lot of push, really, really push to get new players in. I think, like I said, the biggest issue is that we're not really pushing outside of the, like, Bushiroad sphere. If you have friends that play Magic the Gathering, like, try to get them to try this out. I think Shadowverse, honestly, is, like, one of the most mechanically, fulfilling games I've played. So, it's a great game, get people to try it. But I just really focus on staying on top of growth. Don't let your communities die over this. Because that's what I'm worried about the most. I hate that I don't really have many better solutions, because really this is like... It's just going to be a period of pain that we're going to have to get through, if this is what they really want to do. Obviously, the thing I would say is just forget about this, don't do it, keep releasing sets at like the pace we already had, but it's too late for that, really. But yeah, I'm kind of rambling at this point, so thank y'all for watching. This ended up being longer than I kind of wanted it to, but it's something I wanted to address. Like I said, I think the issues here are probably being overblown by a lot of people, but at the same time, community sentiment is what matters the most in terms of keeping your community happy and keeping people playing the game. So if everyone gets upset at this and that just sort of snowballs into people leaving, then you've sort of failed, even if it wasn't that big of an issue to begin with. But yeah, thank y'all for watching. I'll have some deck profiles out, including the deck I played at Worlds this week and moving forward. I'm sort of really reinvigorated from Worlds, so really going to try to push out a lot more content. Bushiroad's still pushing out a lot of product here, side games. But yeah, I'm going to try to push out a lot more content, and sort of stay on top of things a bit better than I have been. So, thank y'all for watching. I'll see y'all next time.